She walked up to my mother's casket, placed white roses on it, and said, loud enough for every single person standing in that cemetery to hear, she was going to be my mother-in-law too. I want you to really sit with that for a second. My mother. My casket. My funeral. A woman I had never seen before in my life. And my husband of 11 years, standing directly beside me with his hand at the small of my back. I had buried my mother that morning. I did not know I would be burying my marriage at the same time. And I had no idea that everything, every trip, every phone call, every late night, every Sunday dinner at my mother's table, had been part of a lie so carefully constructed that it had its own zip code, its own ring, its own set of keys. What happened next, what I did, what I found out, and what my mother had arranged for me before she died without ever telling me she was doing it, I am going to tell you all of it. Every single layer. And every layer is worse than the one before it. But the ending belongs to me. Stay with me. Before I go any further, if you are new to this channel, please subscribe right now. I mean it. I tell real stories, complete, nothing left out, no watered-down versions. Hit that bell icon so you never miss one. Now, let me tell you what happened to Camille. My name is Camille. I am 38 years old. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and up until about 14 months ago, I genuinely believed I was one of the lucky ones. One of those women who found a good man, built a real life, and could call herself happy without feeling like she was performing it for other people's benefit. I grew up in Charlotte. Middle class, tight-knit, just me and my mother Dolores after my father passed when I was 9. My mother raised me with 2 things above everything else, dignity and discernment. She used to say, Camille, you can always tell who a person really is. You just have to be willing to look. I believed I understood that. I did not understand it. Not yet. I finished my master's degree in social work at 27. I was 3 months from defending my thesis when a friend threw a birthday party in her backyard. The kind of party you attend because you feel guilty saying no and because the food is free. I almost didn't go. I stood in front of my closet for 10 minutes thinking, I'm tired, I have a paper due Monday, I should stay home. Something pulled me out the door anyway. I have thought about that decision many times since. About the particular cruelty of fate contained in the small, ordinary moments that change everything. Marcus was standing by the food table. He was overdressed, not offensively, but noticeably, wearing a blazer in a backyard where every other person had on jeans or a sundress. He had a plate of potato salad in one hand, and a look on his face that said he had fully registered the wardrobe miscalculation and was too committed to retreat from it. I walked past him, took a fork, tasted the potato salad, and said under my breath, not really to him, just out loud to no one, too much mustard. He laughed. A real one. Not a polite social acknowledgement. An actual laugh, full and genuine, like I had said the funniest thing he'd heard all week. He looked at me and said, Thank you. I thought I was the only one who noticed. And we talked for 4 hours. 4 hours in a backyard that gradually emptied around us. My friend checked on us twice. We exchanged numbers at 11:30 p.m. I drove home thinking, just. Marcus Williams was a civil engineer who had just relocated from Atlanta. He was 30 years old. He had the specific kind of self-possession that comes from actually having figured out who you are rather than just pretending to know. He was funny in a quiet way. He was attentive in the way that makes you feel like the only person in a room. He called when he said he would call. He showed up when he said he would show up. He was, by every standard I had been given for measuring a man, the real thing. We dated for 2 years. Real dating, dinners, trips, long conversations, meeting each other's families in stages. He met my mother 4 months in. She made him sit at the kitchen table while she cooked dinner, and she asked him questions for 2 hours. The methodical, precise questions of a woman who has spent 30 years teaching other people's children and can tell within 5 minutes whether a person is performing or present. He passed every question. She called me that evening and said, Camille, he is the real thing, don't mess it up. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. He proposed in my mother's living room. He had called her ahead of time. Her idea, she told me later, because she wanted to be present for it. She sat in her armchair in the corner and watched him go down on one knee on her carpet, and watched me try to form the word yes for almost 3 minutes while crying. Then she cried. Then all three of us were in the living room, crying, and Marcus had this expression of pure, exhausted relief, like he'd been holding his breath and could finally breathe. I thought that was love. I read it as love. I think now it was something more complicated than that, but I'll come back to that. We married in the spring of 2013. Botanical garden, 30 minutes outside Charlotte, 80 people, the way we both wanted it. My mother spent 3 Saturday afternoons with me picking out the dress. She vetoed 11 options before we found the one. When I came out of the fitting room in it, she didn't speak for 30 full seconds. Then she said, "That's it, don't take it off." The most decisive she had ever been about anything that wasn't a moral matter. The morning of the wedding, she came to the hotel where my bridesmaids and I were getting ready. She pinned the bustle herself. She adjusted the veil. She held my face in both hands and looked at me for a long moment with those hands shaking, not from nerves, but from the effort of not crying before I'd even walked down the aisle. She said, "Camille, this man is going to take care of you when I can't anymore." I squeezed her hands and told her she was going to be around forever. She gave me a look I couldn't read. I read it differently now. We settled into a 4-bedroom in South Charlotte, crown molding, big backyard, front porch. Marcus was promoted to senior project manager within 2 years. I built my caseload at a nonprofit working with families in crisis. We were busy in the way that means your life is full, not empty. We traveled Portugal, Japan, a long road trip through the American Southwest. We hosted Thanksgiving 4 years running. We renovated the kitchen. We argued about grout tile color for 3 weekends, and it was the most contentious thing that happened in our house for years. I thought that was normal. I thought that was a good life. It was a good life. It just wasn't the complete picture. We tried for children. I mention this because it matters, not for the heartbreak of it, but for what it revealed, or what I thought it revealed. We tried for 2 years. Tests, adjustments, the particular quiet devastation of month after month of nothing. And Marcus, throughout all of it, was patient. He never made it about him. He never implied failure on my part. He held me when I needed to be held, and moved forward when I needed to move forward. I thought a man who can be that present in private grief has nothing to hide. Has to be real. I understand now that some people are extraordinarily skilled at compartmentalization. It looks like presence. It looks like attentiveness. It is, in fact, the practiced ease of someone who has been dividing their emotional labor for years and become very, very good at it. We stopped trying around year 4. No formal conversation, just a mutual, unspoken understanding that we were going to release it and love the life we had. And we did. We genuinely did. That part was real. Whatever else I've had to reckon with, I don't believe the happiness I felt in those years was entirely manufactured. I think Marcus was capable of genuine love. I think he simply chose to apply it in 2 places simultaneously, without either of them ever knowing. There was one moment, one small specific moment that happened about 6 months before our wedding, that I've thought about 1,000 times since. If I had trusted what I saw, everything might have gone differently. I'll tell you what it was, but first, the phone. The phone thing never fully resolved in the background of my awareness. Over 11 years it surfaced maybe a handful of times, never dramatically, never concretely enough to name. It was a pattern, not an event. Marcus kept his phone face down on every surface. Always. He stepped outside to take certain calls. He had 2 email accounts, personal and professional, he said, standard practice for someone dealing with confidential contract work. He made a trip to Atlanta once a month, sometimes twice. His mother lived there, his college friends were there, he had grown up there. The trips were consistent and documented. I had met Miss Evelyn. I had been to Atlanta with him for holidays. The trips were explainable. 6 months before our wedding, Marcus and I were at my apartment watching TV. He was in the kitchen getting water. His phone lit up on the coffee table. I glanced at it the way you glance at any screen that illuminates near you. I saw the text preview. It was from a contact saved as a single letter, D. The preview said, "I miss you, when are you coming home?" He came back before I finished reading it. He picked up the phone, looked at the screen for 1 second, turned it face down, slid it into his pocket. He sat back down. He didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. We went back to the show. And I told myself, family member. Work contact. A name starting with D that I had no context for. I told myself I was looking for problems because I had been hurt before and was projecting. I told myself that so thoroughly and so repeatedly that it became background noise. I told myself that version for the next 11 years. I am not telling you this so you will think I should have known. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand what it actually looks like, from the inside, to trust someone completely. It doesn't look like blindness. It looks like deciding, over and over again, to believe the person sleeping beside you is who they say they are. It looks like choosing, every day, not to live inside suspicion. That is not stupidity. That is love. And there is no test you can run on a person's character that guarantees they will not take that love and hollow it out from the inside. My mother was diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer in January of 2023. She called me herself from her armchair after she got home, after she'd made herself a cup of tea and thought through how to have the conversation. She delivered the news in the same tone she used to tell me about the weather. Baby, I got some news today. It's ovarian cancer, stage 3. The oncologist says we have options. I need you to come over so we can talk about next steps. That was Dolores. Steadiness in every moment. Dignity as a default setting. The next 8 months were the most intense of my life. I reorganized everything around her. My schedule, my caseload, my calendar, my sleep. I became an expert in ovarian cancer, the way that people who love someone become experts. Obsessively, desperately, in the middle of the night with medical journals and research databases and 3 a.m. oncologist forums. She had radiation. She had surgery. She had a second opinion and a third. She had bad days and better days and days when she sat in her garden and seemed almost normal. And on those days, I would let myself believe, briefly, that we were going to get through this. Marcus was present throughout. I want to say that because it's true. He drove her to appointments when I couldn't. He handled things around her house. He sat with her in waiting rooms. He made her laugh genuinely, easily, the way he always could. I remember a specific afternoon, maybe 3 months into her treatment, one of the better ones. I came into her kitchen and found the two of them at the card table playing gin rummy, and she was laughing at something he'd said with her whole body, that full laugh she had. I stood in the doorway and thought, whatever happens, this man has loved this woman well. He has been good to the person I love most. That counts for something. I held that thought the way you hold something warm in your hands. I held it until it burned me. Because here is what I did not know. While Marcus was sitting at my mother's card table making her laugh, my mother already knew. She had known for 6 months. And she was, in the silence of her own grief and her own deliberate calculation, making a decision that I have thought about almost every day since. A decision that would change everything. A decision that was, simultaneously, the most protective thing she ever did for me and the hardest truth she ever kept from me. She died on a Tuesday in September. Early morning, just after 5 a.m., the sky outside her window going from black to a deep, particular blue. She had gone into unconsciousness the evening before. I had been at her bedside through the night, me and my Aunt Rosalind, one of us on each side. There was no dramatic final scene. No cinematic last words. Just the sound of her breathing, which changed slowly and then stopped. 31 years of teaching other people's children. 63 years of being the most solid person I had ever known. And then the quiet. I sat with her for a long time. Long enough for the sky to turn from blue to gray to the pale yellow of morning. I held her hand. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said. In the good conversations and the hard ones, in the Sunday phone calls and the long afternoons in her kitchen. It had all been said. I just had to stay until I was ready to go. The last thing she said to me, 3 days before she lost consciousness, during a good hour in the afternoon when we sat together and talked about everything and nothing, she held my hand and she said, "Baby, you are stronger than you know." I thought she was giving me permission to survive losing her, telling me I was going to be okay without her. I think now she was telling me something specific. I think she was saying, what is about to happen to you, what is coming after this, you are going to survive that too. And I want you to know that before I can't tell you anymore. She was right. She just should have been slightly more specific. If this story is hitting you, drop a comment right now and tell me, and if you're not subscribed, do it. I put out a new story every single week and I never water them down. Now, let me tell you what happened at that funeral, because this is where everything changed. The funeral was 3 days after she passed. I arranged all of it, the church, the flowers, the repast, the obituary, the programs. I am the kind of person who processes grief through motion, through the organizing of things, through keeping my hands occupied so my mind has something to hold on to. I wrote her eulogy in 2 sittings, the first in a kind of white-hot clarity that surprised me, the second more carefully, reading it back to myself until I could get through every word without stopping. Marcus handled the funeral home logistics. He was calm, practical, spoke to the director on my behalf when I needed a moment. I thanked him. He said, "Don't thank me, she was my family too." I believed every word of it. That is the thing I keep coming back to. Not that I was stupid, not that I should have seen it, but that he was so completely convincing that gratitude was the only rational response. A man that good at performing love has been practicing for a very long time. The church service was everything she deserved. Full pews. Standing room along the walls. Her former students filling the 3rd row on the left, several of them now in their 40s, showing up for a woman who had shaped them at 10 years old and never stopped mattering to them. The choir sang 2 of her favorites. The pastor spoke for 25 minutes about a woman who made every person she encountered feel seen. When my turn came at the podium, I looked out at that room and thought, she would have loved this. She would have said it was too much fuss, and she would have loved every second of it. I read the eulogy without stopping once. I don't know how. I think grief had made the words into something I could move through rather than something that could move me. When I finished and returned to the pew, Marcus put his hand over mine. I turned my hand over and held his. And 60 people exhaled simultaneously. I heard it. We moved to the graveside after. October sky, gray and total, the kind of gray that feels like it has weight, like the sky itself is in mourning. The cemetery was quiet with the specific quality of cemetery quiet, which is different from other kinds of silence. 60 of us gathered around the plot. I stood at the head of the casket. Marcus was directly beside me, his hand at the small of my back. My Aunt Rosalind was on my left. The pastor was at the foot of the casket, reading from a small book. I noticed her from about 20 feet away, moving through the outer ring of the gathering. My first assumption was simply that she was one of my mother's people, a former student, a church friend, a community center acquaintance. My mother had touched hundreds of lives, and I did not know all of their faces. This woman was dressed carefully in all black, tastefully, with intention, the way you dress for an occasion when you have thought about what it means to be present for it. She was around my age. Long dark hair. A string of pearls. She was holding white roses, the good kind, full bloom, wrapped in tissue, not gas station roses. She moved through the outer edge of the mourners without drawing attention to herself. She reached the casket. She placed the roses gently on top of the flowers already there. She bowed her head for a moment. I registered her the way you register peripheral detail when your attention is focused elsewhere, noted but not analyzed. And then she raised her head. And in a voice that wasn't loud but that carried with the precision of something aimed, she said, she was going to be my mother-in-law too. The words landed in a specific way. Not with a crash. With a stillness. The kind that happens in the half-second before the brain catches up to what the ears have delivered. My mind processed the sentence and handed it back to me incorrectly twice before arriving at the right meaning. The pastor stopped reading. I heard my aunt make a sound, small, involuntary, a single syllable of disbelief. And I felt Marcus's hand, which had been at the small of my back, warm, familiar, the weight of a man I had trusted with 11 years of my life, go completely, entirely still. Not withdrawn. Frozen. The woman raised her eyes from the casket and looked directly at me. In her expression was grief, but not about my mother. It was a grief that had been there longer than today, the grief of someone who has been holding something enormous without knowing what it was, and has just, in this moment, understood what she was holding. She said, "You're Camille." My voice was completely steady. I don't know how. I said, "Yes." She said, "I'm Dominique, I'm Marcus's wife." The silence that followed was not the silence of shock, or not only that. It was the silence of 60 people recalibrating simultaneously, all of them understanding, at their exact same moment, that something has just detonated in the middle of a place they came to stand still and grieve. I heard my cousin whisper. I heard the pastor close his book. And then I felt Marcus's hand, finally, completely, lift from my back. That is the detail I remember most precisely. The removal of that hand. The specific sensation of something you had been depending on without knowing you were depending on it simply being gone. I turned to look at him. His face had drained of color in the way that happens when the body is responding to something the mind is refusing. He was looking at Dominique. Not at me. At her. His expression was not guilt exactly, and it was not surprise exactly. It was the expression of a man who had built something enormous over a very long time, who had always known at some underlying level that it would eventually collapse, and who was now watching it happen, and discovering that he had no plan for this moment despite having had 11 years in which to make one. I said his name, very quietly. Marcus. He did not look at me. I said, "Is this real?" He said nothing. And in that silence, in the sustained, complete, absolute silence of a man who does not say no when he should say no, I got every answer I needed. My cousin Terrell moved first. He stepped forward, took Dominique gently but firmly by the arm, and walked her back to the outer edge of the gathering. No drama. No raised voice. My Aunt Rosalind placed herself between me and Marcus. The pastor, and I will always respect this man for what he did in that moment, cleared his throat and began reading again. Deliberately. Steadily. Like someone who has decided that the most sacred thing available to him right now is to finish what he came here to do. He read for the full 6 people, 6 rows, 6 minutes remaining in the service. Nobody was listening to a word he said. But he read it. People ask me what I did next. They expect a scene. They expect the explosion. Here is what I actually did. I turned back to face the casket. I folded my hands. I listened to the pastor finish. I watched them lower the casket into the ground. And when my moment came, when the family was invited to place their flowers, I stepped forward, placed my single white rose on top, and I said goodbye to my mother. Privately. Quietly. Inside my own head. In a conversation that had nothing to do with anyone standing around me. Because she deserved that. She had not spent 63 years being extraordinary, so that her burial would be remembered as the day someone else's catastrophe interrupted it. She had raised me to lead with dignity. I chose to lead with dignity. Everything else could wait 90 minutes. After it was done, I walked to the car. I sat in the passenger seat. I took 3 slow, deliberate breaths. And then I called my attorney. That was the moment Marcus should have been afraid. He just didn't know it yet. I need you to stop right here with me, because what you just heard, what happened at that graveside in front of 60 people, that was only the beginning. The next part of this story is what I think about most. If you are not subscribed, please do it right now, and stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you about what my mother did before she died is going to take your breath away. My attorney, Sandra Ockefer, has been my attorney for 6 years. We had worked together on my mother's estate planning the year before the diagnosis. She is measured, precise, and entirely unflappable in the way that people become when they have spent years in rooms where other people's worst moments arrive at their desks. I called her from the cemetery parking lot while Marcus was still speaking to people by the grave. I told her what happened in 4 sentences. She was quiet for 2 seconds, her thinking quiet, not her processing quiet. I know the difference by now, and then she said, "Camille, I need you to do nothing tonight. Go to your aunt's or go home, but don't speak to Marcus beyond what's necessary. Call me at 8:30 in the morning." I said okay. She said, "And don't touch the joint accounts, not tonight." I said okay. She said, "You did nothing wrong, hold on to that." Then she hung up. I spent that night at my Aunt Rosalind's. Marcus came home to an empty house and a text from me. "I'm at Rosalind's, don't call tonight." He didn't call. I didn't sleep. I sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea going cold in front of me, and I ran 11 years backward in my mind, looking for the seams. And I found them. Once I knew what I was looking for, they were everywhere. The Atlanta trips that were slightly too consistent. The apartment he described as my buddy Kevin's place, without ever offering to show it to me. The 2 email accounts. The phone always face down. The single letter D on a screen, years ago on a Sunday night, and a text that said, "I miss you, when are you coming home?" All of it had always been there. I had simply trusted him more than I trusted my own eyes. That is what love does sometimes. It doesn't blind you. It just shifts the weight of the evidence. Over the next 72 hours, through a combination of what Marcus eventually told me, what Dominique shared, and what my attorney's investigation uncovered, I learned the following. Marcus had met Dominique Harris in Atlanta in 2011. Before me. They had been together for 7 months when he relocated to Charlotte. When he met me at that party, laughing about potato salad, overdressed for a backyard cookout, he did not end things with her. He told her the relocation was temporary. He told her he was going to be in Charlotte for a project and that they were building towards something. He maintained both relationships simultaneously and with complete deliberateness. He married me in April of 2013. He told Dominique he had a 3-week infrastructure project that required him to be offline. He married Dominique in September of 2015, a small ceremony in a garden space she had always loved, just their close friends, in Atlanta, and he told his Charlotte colleagues he was at a conference in Denver. He wore my ring in Charlotte. He wore her ring in Atlanta. He kept the second ring in a zippered interior pocket of his travel bag during transitions. He had a second phone. He had a system. He had maintained that system for 11 years without a single person in either world knowing the truth. 2 wives, 2 addresses, 2 sets of family who believed in him completely, 2 women who turned to him in the middle of the night with the most private versions of themselves and trusted him with those versions utterly. And 1 man who had, for 11 years, accepted all of that trust and divided it quietly between 2 lives he had decided he deserved to have simultaneously. How did Dominique find out? My mother told her. Here is exactly how it happened. 6 months before she died, my mother was doing what she had taken to doing in her evenings during treatment, going through old photographs and letters, taking stock of a life. She was part of a Facebook group connected to her church, a large group, members across several states, the kind of community that forms around shared faith and decades of connection. Someone in the group posted an album from a charity gala in Atlanta, a well-attended community event with photographs. My mother was scrolling through absent-mindedly when she stopped on one. Marcus, in a tuxedo, his arm around a woman in a red dress. Both of them smiling at the camera, with the ease of a couple entirely comfortable being photographed together. The photo was tagged. The caption, written by the event organizer, read, "So wonderful to have Marcus and Dominique with us tonight. Congratulations on 4 years together." The photo was dated 2019. We had been married for 6 years. We had just returned from Japan together. My mother looked at that photograph for a long time. I imagine her sitting in her armchair, her tea on the side table, looking at the screen of her phone with that face she had. That very still, very focused face she got when she was working something through. The face of a woman who has decided something needs to be done and is figuring out how to do it. Then she started looking for Dominique. She found her Facebook. She found her Instagram. She found, from cross-referencing posts, the area of Atlanta where Dominique lived. She found, through a mutual connection in the church group, a woman who knew both of them peripherally through Atlanta's community event network, a way to reach her directly. She sent a message through that connection that said simply, "I need to speak with Dominique Harris privately. It is important and it cannot wait." Dominique called her back within 2 days. My mother told her everything on that call. She told her Marcus's full name, his Charlotte address, his employer. She told her that he had a wife in Charlotte. She told her that the wife was her daughter. And then she sent her, via text message, our wedding portrait, the formal photograph that had been on our mantle for a decade, with the date in the corner, April 2013. Dominique was silent for so long after receiving the photograph that my mother thought the call had dropped. Then she said, in a voice my mother described in her letter as the sound of someone watching the floor disappear from under them. One word, how. They spoke 2 more times. My mother gave Dominique everything she had, the facts documented with evidence without editorializing. She was honest about what she didn't know, the full scope, the financial details, the precise logistics. She gave what she had, the truth and proof of it. She did not tell Dominique what to do with it. She said, "You deserve to know. What you do with it is yours." And then she asked one thing, "If something happens to me before my daughter finds out, please make sure she finds out." She did not tell me while she was alive. The letter she left for me, sealed, given to my Aunt Rosalind with instructions to deliver it after the burial, explained why. She wrote, I made a calculation. Camille, I decided you could not absorb this information while simultaneously being the person I needed you to be during my treatment. I do not know if I was right. I know that I could not watch you carry both things at once. I was too selfish to ask that of you. I hope you understand. I hope you forgive me for the timing of it, but I need you to know something. I handled it. I made sure the truth had a path to you. I could not leave without doing that. And then at the bottom of the letter, after everything else, Marcus called me about 4 months before he came to take care of me during that last stretch. I told him I knew. I told him he had to tell you himself. I told him, Marcus, if you don't tell my daughter the truth before I'm gone, I will make sure she finds it after he said he would. He did not. I am sorry I believed him one last time. I have read that letter so many times the paper has gone soft at the folds. I have felt many things reading it. Grief, love, anger, something that doesn't have a name yet. I am not angry at her for keeping it. I understand the love inside the calculation. She was carrying it for me because she didn't want me to have to carry it while I was carrying her. That is the kind of mother she was. Even at the end, she was still trying to absorb the blow before it reached me. What she did instead, the thing she actually accomplished, was make sure the truth had legs. She put it in motion from her kitchen table and her armchair during the months she was dying. She made sure Dominique knew where to find me. She made sure that when she was gone, I would not be the last person in my own life to know the truth about my own life. And so Dominique came to Charlotte. She came to the funeral of the woman who had been the only person in the entire situation to treat her with honesty. She came to pay her respects to a woman she had only spoken to twice, but who had given her the most important information of her life. She told me later that she had not planned to speak. She had planned to stand quietly at the edge of the gathering, leave her roses and leave. But when she saw me standing at the head of that casket, when she saw the face she had studied in the wedding photograph my mother sent her, and she saw that face looking exactly the way she herself had felt for years without knowing what she was feeling, something broke. Something that had been held together by the specific tension of not knowing cracked open at the moment of knowing, and the words came out. We are getting to the part now that I think about the most, because here's where Camille had a choice. She could collapse and nobody would have blamed her for it, or she could do something else. Stay with me, and if you know someone in your life who is going through something in their marriage, someone who needs to hear a story like this, share this video with them right now. You might be doing them more good than you know. Marcus came home the night after the funeral. I had spent the day at my aunt's and returned to the house around 6 p.m. I sat at the kitchen table, the one we had picked out together 7 years ago at a furniture store downtown, heavy solid wood, the one where we had eaten hundreds of dinners and made dozens of decisions and had the kind of ordinary conversations that make up the fabric of a shared life. I sat there with a glass of water and a yellow legal pad and a pen. He came in through the garage door at 7:15. He stood in the doorway and looked at me. I looked at him. That moment, the exchange of looks across our kitchen contained everything. He had been rehearsing something. I could see it in his face. Some version of the conversation he expected. He had prepared for an explosion and found instead the specific stillness of a woman who has already made her decisions and is waiting for the information she needs to execute them. I said, sit down. He sat. I said, I need you to tell me everything. Not the version you've been working on in the car on the way home. Not the version designed to make me understand you a little better than you deserve to be understood right now. The actual truth, all of it, start to finish. You have one opportunity to give me that, and it starts right now. He was quiet for a moment. He looked at his hands on the table. Then he started talking. He talked for almost 2 hours. And I will say this about Marcus. When he finally broke, he broke without reservation. He did not minimize. He did not reframe. He did not offer the version where he was a complicated man in an impossible situation who had made understandable choices. He told me about Dominique, about Atlanta, about the apartment, about the second ring, about the second phone, about the scheduling system he had maintained for 11 years to keep 2 lives from ever touching. He told me about the trips, the calendar management, the specific mechanics of sustaining a deception across the entirety of our marriage. He cried the specific crying of a man who has been carrying something enormous and has finally put it down and found that putting it down is not relief. It is just a different kind of weight. He apologized. He said he loved us both. He said he knew it was wrong from the beginning and did it anyway because he could not bring himself to choose, And he told himself, for 11 years, that he was going to choose, that he was going to sit down and make a decision and stop. And he never did. He said he kept waiting for something to force the decision, and nothing ever did. And so he kept not choosing and called that surviving. I thought about that for a long time afterward. The specific cowardice of a person who mistakes the absence of catastrophe for permission to continue. Who takes the world's silence on a thing as an endorsement of it. Who says nothing has broken yet, so nothing is broken. Until the day a woman places white roses on a casket at a graveside, and everything breaks at once. He told me about my mother. He said she had called him about 4 months before she passed, during one of the periods when she was home between treatment cycles, when he had been going over to help with things around the house. She had asked him to sit down at the kitchen table. She had told him, calmly and directly, exactly what she knew and how she knew it. She had told him, Marcus, you are going to tell my daughter the truth. You are going to sit down with her and you are going to tell her everything. And if you don't do it before I'm gone, I will make sure it reaches her after. He had said he would. He had intended to. He had kept waiting for the right moment, and the right moment kept not arriving, and then she was gone, and he thought, in the specific shameful way of someone who has run out of time to do the right thing, that maybe the moment had passed. That maybe it was over. That maybe nobody would ever connect the pieces. I set my pen down on the legal pad. I said, she gave you a chance. He said, yes. I said, she was dying. She was managing her own death and she still found the capacity to give you a chance to do right by her daughter. And you did nothing with it. He couldn't answer that. He looked at the table. There is no answer for it. There will never be an answer for it that is good enough, and I think on some level he knows that. I think he will carry that specific fact, that she gave him the chance and he didn't take it, for the rest of his life. I think it will be the sharpest part of the thing he carries. I picked up my pen. I wrote one word on the legal pad in large, clear block letters. I turned it so he could read it across the table. Leave. He left that night. He took a bag. He didn't argue. He didn't plead. I think some part of him, the part that had been carrying this for 11 years, the part that had been maintaining the system and managing the schedules and living inside the tension of a deception with no end point. I think some part of him was, underneath the devastation, relieved. The specific shameful relief of someone who has been bracing for the consequence they deserve and can finally stop bracing. I locked the door behind him. I stood in my kitchen in my house, in the life I had built with my own choices and my own work, and I breathed. In and out. And then I went to bed, because I had a meeting at 8:30 in the morning, and I needed to be rested and clear. Sandra Ockafer was at her desk when I arrived, notepad open, coffee untouched. She let me walk through the full story without interrupting, taking notes the whole way. When I finished, she was quiet for exactly the pause that means someone is categorizing information rather than processing emotions. Then she said, Camille, he committed bigamy. In North Carolina, that is a Class I felony. I said I knew. She said, good, because I want us both to be clear on every option available to us before we decide which ones to take. Here is what I decided over the next 2 weeks. First, the finances. Sandra filed immediately for legal separation and flagged all shared assets. The house was in both names. We had joint accounts, retirement accounts, investments. Her office ran a forensic accounting review, standard in separations involving suspected financial fraud, and found $62,000 moved over the course of the marriage through a separate account Marcus had opened in 2014. Used to fund the Atlanta life, the apartment, utilities, groceries, trips, gifts. Small amounts, carefully distributed across months, never enough to flag in any single period. 11 years of small amounts is $62,000. It is 11 years of shared money funding a second life that I did not know existed. Second, I called Dominique. People were surprised by this. They expected either a wall of silence or a confrontation. What they didn't understand is that Dominique and I were not each other's problem. Marcus was our problem. And practically, legally, emotionally, we were more useful to each other cooperating than competing. I called her. I asked if she wanted to meet. She said yes immediately. We sat across from each other in a cafe in Midtown Charlotte on a Thursday morning, 2 women who had never met, and yet knew each other in the most intimate and humiliating way possible, and we dismantled the lie together. We shared documentation. We compared timelines. We found the overlaps, the conference in Denver that was their wedding, the 3-week project in Charlotte that was ours, and we looked at the full picture of what a man with a system had built across 11 years of our lives. There were tears. There was also something close to recognition. We were not the same woman, but we had both loved the same man with the same sincerity, and he had taken that and divided it without either of us knowing. She had her own attorney by then. We agreed to cooperate in legal proceedings. We agreed, without either of us having to say it explicitly, that Marcus was not going to walk away from this having sacrificed nothing. Third, the police report. I sat with this decision for 10 days. I thought about the visibility, the complications, whether I wanted to be the woman who filed a criminal report against her husband or the woman who simply dissolved the marriage and moved forward. I thought about what my mother would have said. And then I thought about Miss Evelyn, Marcus's mother, a woman I had genuinely loved, who had called me daughter, who had been deceived by her own child the same as the rest of us. I thought about every person in that ecosystem who had trusted him and been betrayed by that trust. And I filed. Bigamy is a Class I felony in North Carolina. The investigation moved with the slowness of all legal processes, but it moved. Fourth, Marcus's employer. He was a senior project manager for a firm holding several government infrastructure contracts in the Carolinas. Government contracts carry specific character disclosure requirements. I did not fabricate anything. I did not exaggerate anything. Through my attorney, I provided the firm with the documentation that already existed in the legal proceedings, the marriage certificates, the police report number, the forensic accounting findings. I let the documented facts of what he had done speak in the professional context where he had built his reputation. He was placed on administrative leave 31 days later. Contract reviews began the following week. There is a version of this story where I interrogate that decision, where I ask myself whether his career was too high a price. I have sat with that question honestly and for a long time. Here is where I always land. Marcus had access to 2 spheres of consequence, the marriage and the money. He had assumed that the worst I could do to him would come from within those 2 spheres. What he had not calculated was that a woman who has been systematically deceived for 11 years does not feel bound to the domains the deceiver assigned to her. He made professional choices that depended on projecting a character he did not possess. I made sure the people who depended on that projection had accurate information. The facts spoke. I simply let them. The divorce was finalized 14 months after the funeral. I got the house. I got half of the shared accounts plus a settlement encompassing the diverted funds once the forensic accounting was complete. The house was refinanced in my name alone. The name on the deed is mine. The name on the mortgage is mine. I bought a new mailbox from the hardware store on a Saturday in February and installed it myself. The name on it is mine. Marcus pled guilty to the bigamy charge. He received a suspended sentence and 2 years of probation. I will be honest, that felt lighter than the weight of what he had done. But a suspended sentence comes with a criminal record in a professional field that requires background checks. It is not nothing. It is, in fact, the kind of thing that follows a person quietly and permanently, the way his lies followed us, except in the opposite direction. I have no contact with him. He has attempted to reach out twice since the divorce, once through a mutual friend, once through Miss Evelyn, who I believe was acting in genuine good faith because she is a good woman who raised a man she thought she understood. I did not respond to either attempt. There is nothing he could say that I need to hear. The door on that side of my life is not just closed. It has been replaced entirely with a different wall. Dominique moved back to Atlanta after the legal proceedings concluded. We still talk once a month sometimes less, sometimes more depending on where we each are. Last spring she sent me a photograph without context. A restaurant, a man I didn't recognize, and her smiling in the way you smile when you are not performing happiness, but actually inside it. I texted back a single red heart. She sent one back. That was the entire conversation, and it was enough. Some things don't need more words than that. What she and I share is not a friendship exactly. It's something that doesn't have a name yet. 2 women who were handed the same wound and chose not to use it to wound each other. That is its own kind of thing. People ask me constantly if I'm dating. They want the recovery arc. They want to hear that I found someone better and everything clicked into place. Here's the actual arc: I am not dating. Not because I am broken, I want to be very clear about that, but because I am, for the first time in a very long time, completely and unambiguously in love with my own life. The backyard I redesigned myself this past spring: stone path, raised garden beds, a pergola with string lights I hung on a Saturday afternoon with a borrowed drill. I sat out there alone on a Thursday evening with lemonade, and I felt a satisfaction that came entirely from within myself, with no dependence on another person's presence or approval. That was new. That felt like something worth protecting. I went back to Portugal in March. Just me. Stayed where I wanted, ate what I wanted, spent 3 unplanned hours in a ceramic tile museum because I felt like it and had nobody to consult. The trip remade the memory. Portugal belongs to me now. I still go to work every day and sit across from families in crisis and try to help them find the next step. People ask if the work got harder after everything that happened. The honest answer: it got clearer. I understand now, in a way I didn't before, what it feels like to have the ground removed from underneath you. To need someone to sit across a table from you and be honest, without an agenda. I try to be that person every day. My mother was that person for 63 years. It's the best inheritance she left me. I call Aunt Rosalind on Sundays. That was always my mother's time to call. We talk for an hour, usually about nothing in particular, and usually somewhere in the middle of the hour we talk about Dolores. And somewhere in that conversation, one of us laughs at something she would have said, and usually that laugh arrives right behind tears, in the specific rhythm that grief actually has in real life. Not the resolved, cinematic version, but the real version, where the laugh and the cry live right next to each other for what appears to be the rest of your life. I am learning to let that be fine. I am learning that you don't have to resolve a thing to live inside it with dignity. My mother's house sold in the spring. I kept 3 things. Her armchair, which is in the corner of my living room now. Her card table. And the letter, which is in the top drawer of my nightstand. I haven't read it in 3 months. I don't need to read it anymore to remember what it says. I have it memorized in the way you memorize things that are both wounds and gifts simultaneously. The words just live in you. The last thing she wrote at the bottom of the last page, after the explanations and the apology and everything else: Camille, you are the best thing I ever made. Don't let this make you smaller. Don't let him have that. Let it make you as big as you were always supposed to be. I read that line and I think, okay, mama. Okay. People always want to know the lesson. They want it packaged, clean, portable, something they can carry out of a story like this and apply somewhere. I understand the impulse. So here is what I actually believe, and it is not a bumper sticker, but it is real. The lesson is not, watch for the signs. I had the signs. I saw a text preview on a phone screen on a Sunday night in my own apartment. I noticed the face down habit. I registered, in some part of my mind that I did not let speak at full volume, that something was slightly off. The lesson is not that I should have looked harder, trusted less, been more suspicious. A life lived in constant suspicion of the person you sleep beside is not a life. It is a different kind of prison, one you build around yourself out of self-protection and call vigilance. The real lesson, the one I have sat with the longest, the one that has stayed after all the anger burned down to what it actually is this: you cannot control whether someone chooses to deceive you. There is no audit rigorous enough, no standard of attention high enough, to guarantee that a person with a system and 11 years of practice will not sustain that system right through the middle of your life without detection. What you can control is what you do when the truth arrives. And the truth always arrives. On your terms or not. In a gentle conversation, or at your mother's graveside, with 60 people watching. But it arrives. My mother understood this. She spent the last months of her life making sure of it. And when it comes, when the floor drops and you are standing somewhere in public, with the most private devastation of your life breaking open in front of everyone, what you do in that moment is not a reaction. It is a revelation. It is you discovering, in the most direct and irreversible way possible, who you are when the person you thought was holding you has let go entirely. I found out I was the woman who got through the burial first, who called her attorney from the parking lot before she drove home, who sat across from the other wife and chose cooperation over cruelty, who made 4 deliberate decisions in the right sequence without losing sight for a single day of where she was going, who rebuilt her backyard with her own hands, who went back to Portugal alone and loved every single minute of it. I found out I was exactly the woman my mother raised. And I found out she was right. She was, as she almost always was, right about everything. If you are somewhere right now feeling like something is wrong, in your marriage, in your relationship, with someone you are supposed to trust, I want you to listen to that feeling. Not to spiral. Not to build accusations out of nothing. But because that quiet, consistent, persistent feeling of something being off, that is your own intelligence talking. That is you knowing something you have not yet let yourself fully know. And you deserve the truth. Even when it arrives in the worst possible packaging. Even when it costs you more than you ever expected to have to pay. Even then, especially then, you deserve it. Because on the other side of the truth is a life that is entirely and completely yours. A life where the name on the deed is your name. Where the backyard is your backyard. Where Sunday evenings belong to you and the people you actually choose. I'm Camille. I'm 38 years old. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I have a backyard I built myself, a drawer with my mother's letter in it, and a Sunday afternoon phone call with my aunt that I do not miss for anything in the world. And I am still here. If this story moved you, if something in what Camille went through felt familiar, felt like something you needed to hear today, drop a comment below. Tell me what landed hardest. Tell me your own story if you want to. This channel is a space for real stories told completely, and the comments are part of that. Please subscribe if you are not already. I put out a new story every single week. Real, complete, nothing watered down, nothing softened for comfort. Hit the bell so you never miss one. And if you know someone going through something hard right now, in their marriage, in their family, in a relationship where something feels wrong, share this video with them. Sometimes the most important thing you can give someone is the knowledge that they are not alone in it. That other people have stood where they're standing and found their way through. Thank you for spending this time here. To Camille, wherever you are, whatever Sunday evening you are sitting in right now, thank you for letting your story be told. Your mother raised something extraordinary. I'll see you in the next one.